implement this prototyping or implement the bio-based materials in the prototyping phase. So our students, instead of normally working with the materials that they have there, they start making their own materials before going over to or then working with the material they make themselves. And so therefore we have in UGent, Campus Kortrijk, a space for it, so a biolab, where students can really experiment with it. So we have different equipment there, some clean rooms to work, some growing ovens, and also a 3D printer that is meant for clay, but that the students can use to print other materials with. And here you see some work of the students. So different things. So they start from existing recipes that are already on the internet, but try to find really solutions or applications for it within the lab. And here you see some other results of some students. So here a team is printing with eggshells. Another team is printing with coffee materials. But if you want to know more of it, the students themselves have an Instagram page, so you can follow them, and it is themselves that arrange the Instagram page. But we also have a website, which Francesca will put in the chat. So if you want to take a look there, you will find more information about what we will do, but also some upcoming events. So for example, we will have a breakfast session about the role of design within this circular material site given by Jan Leijsens. And also the students will present their results on 22 of June. And that's also a public, or that's also going to be a public event. But then now we will have the presentations of Camilo, of Jasper, and Rodrigo. So the aim is that all the keynote speakers will have 20 minutes to give their lecture, and then we will have the Q&A afterwards. So the idea is that you already put your questions in the chat. We might pick out one question after the lecture immediately, but then the rest of the questions will be at the end of the session, and you can also really at the end ask the questions yourselves. But first put them in the chat. Okay, so that's it. I'll give the stage to first of all Camilo.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you very much. I think I'm ready now. So let's just do a quick check on the screen. But wait, I think it's better for me to share the whole screen. Just let me know if you see my screen. Perfect. Then I'm going to hide this somewhere. Okay. So thank you very much for the invitation. For me, it's always a pleasure and trying to share these ideas about our research. Connected with what Luis just said, I'm going to show you what we have been developing the last 5 years. It's a project that started at Politecnico di Milano, but we are just spreading it a little bit around the world. Right now I'm in Colombia, and I am trying just to give also some ideas about this this possibility to do materials, or to, as designers, being engaged with materiality. First of all, I just want to show you who we are. We are a team led by Valentina Rognoli from Politecnico di Milano, and we focus in all the different things and topics regarded to materials and design. So Myself, I devoted to this possibility to engage with materials as a designer, to produce materials. But other my colleagues focus more on technology and materials or biomaterials, and we have this general framework just to show you this is all the things that we do. Today I'm going to show you this side, what we call DIY materials, why we call it that way, why we think this phenomenon is growing in a positive way, and try to connect it with what you are doing in terms of biomaterials and circularity, trying to give you, let's say, an idea how this theory or how this research can be connected with what designers are doing currently, okay? Keep in mind this frame. We are going to be understanding it better after some minutes. We publish a lot of things regarding to the materials experience, which is the main focus of what we do. Everything that you are listening today, I'm proud to announce that we are going to publish it in a second book, which is called Material Experience 2. The first edition was a very good book in which we put all the theories that we have been developed through the years. So the second edition is having a lot of topics regarded or connected with this materiality and circular economy. So I'm going to show you very briefly what was my PhD research about. I had the honor to be led by two of the main, let's say, persons in the planet that deals with materials for design, Valentin and Elvin. And I call it the materials generation because I thought it was a good idea to, it was a nice wordplay. No, it's a new generation of designers that engage in materiality, but also it's a new way or a new idea of developing materials because we have a lot of tools to do that, no, as designers. This is the definition we coined, and as you know, you say many things, but once you publish something, then people believe, you know. So it was nice because this article was published in a very nice journal. So in the moment that Valentina and other scholars coined that term of DIY materials, all the material science domain started to believe, no? Sometimes it is important to say that. So this was the definition, but what we, and I entered into the PhD, tried to give a theory behind that definition. But the definition arises as a way to connect a lot of things that were happening. A lot of things were happening in terms that designers were tired of having problems or access. Maybe some of you have these problems trying to access to materials, or designers were having these sustainability issues in their minds, that they want to do something better. They want to change the current status quo of the society. So so it was this possibility to understand that not only material scientists could develop materials, which is the classic way to do things, no? And they were looking at the material side from the molecular point of view, trying to do something very minuscule and try to, they still do it, okay? But it's another approach. We start seeing that there were a lot of designers that they were doing materials, but with a very nice component, which is the project. No, we as designers, we put the project in front of everything that we do. So even when a designer engaged with materiality, it engaged it with project thoughts in mind. So it's very nice because a lot of things starting to pop up, to sparkle. Okay. So my task was, or my research was, trying to organize this and try to give to this phenomenon a ground, a scientific ground. And what I start understanding, and what I start to understand, is that every time a designer produced something which was related both to the materiality but both to the project, there were some things that were different from traditional. Okay. And this happened because we have access to internet, and we have this open and sharing economy, and now we have this democratization of technology. We can build our own machines. We don't depend on others to do things. So we are becoming more independent in understanding the whole chain behind the project. So what happened is that I started to study all these designers and all these people doing these projects with materiality, and they start sharing a lot of common things. So I don't know if it was something out of luck or out of the research, but I came into this. You remember probably when we were at the school, they used to teach us. That the earth was divided in three kingdoms, and it was a theory of Linneo, the taxonomy of nature. And when I started understanding or analyzing all these cases, they become very similar. They become very similar in terms of the characteristics that they share. The difference between Linneo in the 17th or the 18th century, sorry, was they didn't have trash, or they don't have this concept of throwing garbage into the world. Neither they have this idea of having technology as a source. So the difference between the Linnean taxonomy and what we propose is we needed to add two other kingdoms based on what, let's say, the impact that we now as people have in the planet. And it was very nice because all the cases that we studied, they fit perfectly in each kingdom. So we launched this theory that the DIY materials could be divided into kingdoms. Another thing that was very interesting in the research is that when we were doing this classification, it was very nice to see that normally what we call the STEM materials, or the normal industrial materials, they lose a lot of things on the way. So this is an example of the ores when you extract some materials from the earth, and when you transform it industrially, you lose everything. You lose color, you lose texture, you lose, let's say, the soul of the material. So if you are not an expert on materials, you don't understand the difference between one and another, just talking aesthetically. But what happened with DIY materials is that they share, they keep this DNA within them. These are just two examples. One is made out of beetle shells, and as you can see, from the source material to the final material sample, you can feel that you don't lose nothing on the way, and the material always keep its soul. Or as you can see, this is a material made out of a residue of orange peels. So this was very interesting to understand that thing, and maybe because we are designers and we are engaged also with the senses and what all the senses can tell in the project, the material itself try to maintain the sensoriality within. Okay, this is what we are now. I'm not going to go deep into it because of course there is no time for it, but we, apart from the kingdoms that fit very well, we started to do a small sub categorization. Today I'm going to show you a little bit about the kingdom vegetabile because it's what it's important for us now. But what is interesting is that with this classification, it's very easy for the designer when engaged in a
Sorry, Camila, but we can't hear you anymore.
Um, do you hear me?
Yeah, now we hear you.
Okay, sorry. I think I have some internet issues. It always happens this way, no? When we so I don't know where you stop listening, but maybe I'm going to stop here to tell you what is important about this is just an idea to show you all the things that a designer takes in consideration when starting to develop a material. Okay, apart from the source, which are the five kingdoms, we always engage trying to find there's something to drive us, you know, it's a problem to solve, an opportunity that we have as a designers. We have an inspirational source. So we always are doing this technology research or observation what's going on in the world. So we take inspiration from that. And we try to build something. Either we have a laboratory, or we build a workshop, or we consider ourselves makers. So these are, let's say, the conditions we have found that are important for a designer to engage into a materiality project. As I said, I'm going to show you very quick what's about this kingdom, the first kingdom, which is connected with we are presenting today to you. And the first kingdom, kingdom vegetabile, includes all DIY materials which designers can grow or can farm or can collect from nature, okay, and construct it and build it into a project. These are some examples of different designers that have been engaged. We have classified them considering if it's something that is farm, something that is something that you can find in the forest, something that you can just grasp and experiment with it, or something that grow. No, even right now, the biology taxonomy doesn't have fungi in the vegetabile taxonomy, but for us, just to be clear, it was easier to put it into this category. So everything that is going on with mycelium, or everything that you can grow, some algae that you can grow and you can extract pigments or anything, come into this subcategory. Sometimes you also can experiment with food. No, there are, of course, there is an ethical idea that you cannot take something that you used to eat, but there are a lot of things that people, our society is throwing a lot of food, or not consuming it properly, or abandon at the end of in the market day or something. So it's something that you can recuperate, or you can work with it. Or you just can understand the way the nature has been developing a lot of skins, or even natural packages, and get inspired with it. Okay, these are also some examples of projects that our students have developed based on this classification, and you just put it here. Don't worry if I don't go deep into it, because you can go to this website, and we are, let's say, putting this open to everybody. So we are just putting all the kingdoms and try to classify all projects that designers are developing, and we are putting there, so you can go to this database and get an idea, or go deep into a particular material. For us, it's very important that the material keeps a recipe. We try to keep it open source, that anyone can replicate. As I said, the sharing economy is important. So if you find a recipe for a material that is interesting for your project, you can take it from there and you can work with it. So if you remember this map, this roadmap that we have as a team, it allows us to understand that this connection with DIY materials is strongly connected with what biomaterials are being developed, and of course in terms of circular economy. I just wanted to highlight to you another research that started in our group. Barbara started to focus and try to understand these biomaterials that in a way come from the first kingdom, and try to put a framework into it. Important to understand about this biodesign is that it's a way to construct another industry. No, is this idea of understanding a material that comes from biology sources, and understand the way also how nature construct things, and the way, or the faster we understand that the way nature does things is better in terms of economy, in terms of resources, in terms of development, the better is going to be for everybody. I'm not saying that the industry is doing it wrong. It's doing it okay. No, let's put it that way. But there is an alternative to do it, and as you can see in this graphic, the idea of or the time that what other materials and other sources are taking at the end of the cycle is very difficult and is very problematic. While when we work with natural sources, we have another dimension. We can produce, or we can create artifacts or products that maybe last less, or have another impact in the world, or can produce even different languages. Just to wrap up and finalize, this is a project that we developed, sponsored by the European Union. We call it MADE, which is Material Designers. But the idea was to put all this theory, and try to prove it, to see if designers were not only doing things by their own, but if they were guided into this taxonomy, into these guidelines, into this idea of producing materiality with a tinkering process, could produce things. And it was, let's say, three main organizations were heading the research, but other universities throughout Europe were working on it. This was the main idea. Building materials, but with creativity in mind, and trying to find circular solution. A lot of people participate, and the idea, it was just having this, and this is what DIY materials is about. It's just having a free experimentation, trying to, use your kitchen tools or use your workshop tools, and try to imagine possible futures and possible narratives to change things, to change ideas, and manipulating materials with a creative brain, let's say. It produces many possibilities for for alternative futures of what we have right now. Many designers participate from all over Europe, and I just highlighted some related to the vegetable kingdom, which was projects that could understand how we can be more, how to say, more conscious when we are developing materials. Of course, I am not showing you here products or applications, because this is something that is starting to happen. But when you take biopolymers and you just try to mix it with other materials, you can have behaviors. No, this is a material that it's a biopolymer that mixed with metal. You can have a very nice tactile experience, and and you can start building structures with it. Or Tamara, which she found this this pine fiber, and start to understand that it can build things. It can produce surfaces, textures, even grow things. and start believing that with the material you can also transform the industrial processes. No, the industrial processes are very basic. No, the industrial revolution, what did is started to optimize the normal crafts processes. So trying to connect these natural materials with processes is interesting, or projects that you can take fibers and you can start weaving or constructing things the way we used to do it before the industrial revolution, but with the possibility to having new technologies and hacking things and building things. So I don't know how much time do I have, but I think I'm done with time. But just you can take a look at this. You can go to the MADE website and trying to see all the videos, because what is important and something that I highlighted in the beginning is that we as designers, we don't only develop the materials, we also develop a narrative with the materials. So it's very different, no? Normal material.
Camilo, I think the audio went off again. Okay, so as we understand, you have some problems with the internet. As you mentioned, it's typical to have them at this moment. Don't worry. I had some questions I wanted to ask to you now, but I will wait for later at this point. And I would remind to everyone that for sure you can put questions if you have them also for Camilo in the chat, and we will address them at the very end of the 3 sessions. For now, thank you very much, Camilo, for the very inspiring presentation. I appreciate it very much. Now we can hear you. But,
I'm sorry, the internet is I don't know, something is happening wrong. No? But I hope you got the main idea.
you really just leaped away in the last seconds. So
okay.
In that sense, don't worry, but maybe I suggest we will move to the next speaker, and I will keep my question for the very end question and answer session. Okay. But thank you very much.
Francesca. Thank you.
Okay, I think then it's my turn. You can all hear me well? All right, perfect. Thanks a lot, Camilo. It was really interesting presentation. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me as well. I'm gonna try to share my screen. It looks like I can't share my screen. Can you enable it? Okay.
Now should work.
Yes, perfect. Okay. Good. All right, you can all see the first slide. Looks good. Okay, perfect. All right. Thanks a lot again for having me. So my name is Jasper Bloemen. I'm one of the co-founders of Glimps.bio. I will explain in a minute what Glimps.bio is, which kind of company we are. But I actually wanted to to as well mention that this presentation, I think, is a perfect bridge between the presentation of Camilo and the presentation of Rodrigo that's about to come. And it's also kind of shows the personal evolution that I've been going through, going from DIY to actually setting up a company and trying to launch more like biomaterials or bio-based materials at scale. And so I think that's I think a very interesting thing that a presentation that I wanted to share with you all. But before I start, actually, I want to share a little anecdote. It's around 3 years back. It was a big festival in Brussels. The guy you see here in the yellow jersey, he's now our prime minister. And that time he was the Minister of Sustainable Development. And we met at a big event in Brussels where he was visiting our booth. And I was, as you can see in the bottom, showing our samples of mycelium material, or mushroom material, or mycomaterials. He was completely completely flabbergasted by the fact that you could use mycelium, or what actually mycelium is, he didn't know, but that you could use mushrooms to grow biofabricate materials. So he was there was an interview with him later on, and he was talking, he was super impressed about it. And so that was nice to see that you could inspire like a minister, and that he would be really inspired by it. But of course, with a minister, there's always like a big bunch of business people coming over, and that's how it looked like. You see me on the right explaining to people from the construction industry what biomaterials are, what biofabrication is, and so on. And actually, they gave me 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes, to explain my story and to tell what we're doing with Glimps. And then always the same questions always popped up. And it is, how much can you produce? Or how much does it cost? How many can you produce? And how good is it compared to bricks, for instance, or compared to our standard materials? And why am I sharing this anecdote? It's because we as a company, we have been struggling in the beginning with this question all the time. And it's very typical when you start from a DIY perspective, or from a perspective you're working on a prototype and you try to innovate on materials. It's always these three typical, or even more, but these questions that are popping up, and to actually question whether your material or your product or prototype is really innovative. Because from their viewpoint or point of view, it's only innovative if you can scale it. And I think that's where the big challenge is, to scale all the work that you're doing, or that is being done on DIY level. And if there's the ambition, of course, to scale, it's a very challenging task to get it actually up to the level, for instance, that Rodrigo is at the moment, like with Notpla. And that's why that's the main message that I want to address in this presentation. Now, a little bit about Glimps, to show actually that we have our DNA is really rooted in this DIY DIY biomaterials. Actually, we started as a sort of a spin-off of an open biolab reagent. What is an open biolab? It's actually a kind of biohacker space. I don't like the term a lot, but it's actually a space where we try to bring biology and biotechnology close to the people by introducing them, by letting them experiment. So we take it out of the university walls, and actually you put a pipette in their hands and they start experimenting. That's the basic idea of a DIY bio lab. And actually there's a whole community of 160 labs around the world, and there are even labs at the big universities. For instance, at MIT, there's always a big bio summit every year. So we started as a sort of spin out from this open biolab reagent. And we started actually experimenting mainly with mycelium materials. So for instance, we were together with Permafungi, we helped them, actually they're a mushroom growing company, we helped them to valorize their mushroom waste into the first Belgian mycelium product, which you can see, it's a lampshade, it's the Lumifungi. And so two to 3 years ago, we helped them to design, actually based on mycelium technology, to actually design an object which is way more worth than actually the waste stream that is coming out of this oyster mushroom plant. So that's how it started with Glimps. So mainly focusing on the mushroom materials, but we kind of evolved from there, because what we actually kind of realized with Glimps, that we were kind of ahead of the biggest industry that were looking out for new biomaterials, and that mycelium was too new for companies here in Belgium. So we actually pivoted, and the past half a year we kind of changed or pivoted towards more focus on waste streams. And so now we have actually evolved from more this DIY approach, focusing on mycelium, but other materials, I will discuss them in a minute, towards more an approach where we want to work on scale and on bigger, actually, bigger waste streams. And one of the projects, for instance, that you can see over here is Café Circulair. And there we're working on actually valorizing coffee grounds, spent coffee grounds, into new products. You might think that's not new. Well, indeed, it's maybe not new, the concept, but it's not new. It's new doing it at scale. And that's the big difference, because we're working on actually on setting up a new company where we want to focus towards valorizing 5,000 tons a year. And so that's the difference now. We are focusing more on actually on scale products, but still we as well have this connection with the biomaterials. For instance, what you can see here is on the left-hand side, this is a coffee-based biomaterial where we combine it with miscanthus sort of reed and a biobinder that's together with a Belgian startup, Circular Matters. And so you see these color-based, so the color is based on coffee grounds. On the right-hand side, we are experimenting with creating 3D filament using coffee grounds. And so this is in combination with PLA. But we are avoiding like single-use applications. So we're not going to produce coffee cups. Actually, the main focus of this project is coffee soap, but that's a side note. Now, with Glimps, we are positioning ourselves in actually 3 domains. And it's kind of based on the design thinking approach by IDEO. And so we believe that if we want to have this sustainable transition happening, we need researchers or people doing R&D or scientists, we need designers, and we need actually the business people, the entrepreneurs. And that relates to the circular bioeconomy, biodesign, and biotech. And we believe that all of them should work together. And that's one of my main messages as well, that we need to strive for this collaboration. And I think with biomaterials, biodesign, it's a perfect case where you see that scientists and designers should work together. And if we do it at scale, we need this entrepreneurial mindset. Now, we have been working a lot on mycelium materials. So for instance, here on the left-hand side, you see me in one of the spawn producers here in the vicinity of Ghent. And we've been producing these mushroom panels on the right-hand side. We produced 200 of them. And then, so that was at that time, that's around 3 years ago, like our biggest project, on the biggest scale. And that was for an art installation. But we as well worked on other projects. So we designed prototypes. For instance, here you see a bacterial leather bow tie. So that's actually based, it's complete cellulose. And that was for another installation. So we all had these concepts and these prototypes in these early days. And we tried to actually push the scene at the same time. A bit similar to what Camilo has been saying about open source, as we have been setting up as well the biofab forum, which it's still running, and it's an open source platform on biomaterials and biofabrication. So people are exchanging all their successes when producing the materials, but as well their failures, of course. Especially the last one are the most interesting, of course, so you don't make the same mistakes. And so we've been pushing people to actually share as much as possible and as open source as possible, and to actually help move this whole, or help this movement forward to go forward. And so that's what connected again with this DIY concept of biomaterials. But actually the question is, how do you scale it, and how can you make sure that if people have the ambition to go from, let's say, from DIY, and they want to move towards, I want to do that, things at scale, and that's the question, how is that possible? And those are a couple of pointers that I will give in the presentation. So for instance, how can I produce these 10,000 mycelium bricks that you see over here, a project by Highfly already, I think from 2008. It was a project together with Ecovative, the guys who actually, the company who has kind of invented the biofabrication technique based on mycelium. So how can you do that on scale, and how can you produce 10,000 bricks? So you see the big difference between going towards a single prototype, or for instance, in our case, producing 100 panels and going up to 10,000. There's a very big difference in between that. How can you make this transition happen? Now, again, there are aspects that are coming into play when talking about this scaling these dimensions. And actually, it's about price, scale, and performance. Because, for instance, this performance is a very critical aspect when you want to go to bio-based materials, and if you want to have these bio-based materials, this entry into the industry. Because this is, for instance, an example of a survey done by a project BioSwitch, where they did a survey with 66 companies. And so there the question was, what is actually the main reason why there's no uptake in the company for bio-based materials? And there are two important aspects why there is no bigger outroll or no bigger scale or easier scale of these bio-based materials. And it's actually because it's too expensive. That's one. And there's a lot of uncertainty around functional performance. Okay, but we see that there's the mindsets are changing, and this mindset is changing because they as well realize now, especially with the Green Deal that is coming, that more and more they realize that actually waste is a design flaw, and that they actually need to find solutions for these waste streams. And especially now in this period that we as well see that the supply chains for the resources that we're shipping in from all over the planet, actually we see that there's a big problem with the supply chain currently, and that prices are doubling. So we more and more go towards this circular economy approach, and biomaterials are as well providing an answer to that. But still, we see that there's a difficulty with working with the same context and having the right expectations for this design solution that is based that is bio-based. For instance, here this is one cartoon where you see that actually within a specific context and a time area, there's things are being designed that afterwards you realize, like, what the heck? I mean, why did even people in that time were thinking about it? And that's actually the evolution that we would need, because in the future, I'm pretty sure, like what Rodrigo will be presenting with about Notla and the edible packaging, for instance, will become more and more common, so that we will look back and have the same reflection as we are doing now when seeing like these with these buckles or with these belts around their neck. And now we see as well this evolution because for me, the biomaterials and the biofabrication really started off like with the biocouture, actually the biocouture jackets, for instance, from Suzanne Lee in 2003. And since then, we have seen a very big evolution. Now, I wanted to share this presentation as well. So besides the showing that there's a big gap, I as well wanted to share my insights, and these are really personal, my personal evolution that I've been going through to see how you can move from this DIY bio scene and actually move it towards setting up, for instance, a company where you actually scale your solution and try to scale your impact as well. And I think one important aspect is that first one, you focus on the right bio challenge that you want to tackle. There are really different approaches and different angles and how you can actually go with and enter this bio scene and start from there. Remember again these three circles, because you can really focus on the research side, you can really focus on the design side, but as well you can approach it from a more circular economy perspective, where you focus, for instance, on the waste side. I will give some examples. But first, it's important, of course, to understand what biomaterials, bio-based, biofabricate, and what it is about. And there's a very good report published by Biofabricate and Fashion for Good was released last year, December last year, where they actually, within the context of fashion, they describe what these terms actually mean, because there's a lot of usage of these terms, but I have the impression that a lot of terms are being mixed up. And so you see that there's a big difference between a biomaterial, which is actually a term used to indicate a material that have non-specific biological association, so very broad, towards a bio-based material, which are derived from biomass such as plants, trees, or animals. For instance, so these coffee-based boards, that's a typical example of a bio-based material. But then you have biofabricated materials within these bio-based materials, which are produced by living cells and microorganisms and yeast and mycelium. So the mycelium is a biofabricated material. And then you even have bioassembled materials, for instance, and that's again with living microorganisms, but that would be then, for instance, these cellulose leather alternatives, for instance, so the microbial cellulose, the bow tie that I showed. So you see that's already the nomenclature, and the usage of the different terms is already a bit it's a bit confusing. But I wanted to show you as well how you can approach these bio-based materials from different angles, because there are really different starting points. You can really start from an R&D perspective and try to scale it from there. For instance, you have here the company MycoWorks that have recently launched a collaboration with Hermes, a new bag, actually a purse, and where they started using this myco leather, and where they focused a lot for years and years really on the scientific aspect, on the R&D, and it took them years to actually perfectionize the whole mushroom leather, and now they claim it's actually it's as competitive, like in performance, as competitive as a traditional leather. Of course, price will be way higher at this point because it's a limited editions, but still the performance is on point. And remember, that was one of the key criteria that I highlighted already in the presentation. So you can focus, it's really from the R&D perspective, the science perspective, but you can as well focus from the waste perspective. For instance, you have Woola, it's a startup in Estonia, and they reuse wool to actually make a packaging and like to replace the bubble plastic. Because there are 200,000 tons of wool in Europe each year are not being used, and they're just thrown away. So it's really from the circular economy perspective that they're actually working on. But as well, in Belgium, you have similar startups where they have more on the circular economy, working on biomaterials. And for instance, here you have Circular Matters focusing on waste streams, where they're using Japanese knotweed, for instance, or grasses as a waste stream. And then finally, you have more from the design sides and the design approach, where storytelling really becomes a really important issue. It's limited editions that are launching on the market. And so, for instance, you have Bob Hendricks. I think you might maybe have all seen his mycelium coffins that were launched last year, and where actually they're focusing on the storytelling a lot. And where it's more from a design perspective that he's actually entering the market and trying to scale from the experiments in his lab and try to scale his project. Now, another aspect, if you want to scale, and that's for every business, but as well for the biomaterials, because it's so new, is to see where you find this right fit, this product fit for your customer. Because the problem is, or the challenge is with biomaterials, it's so new that you actually need to have a good fit with your customers. And it was pretty clear going back to this big event in Brussels like 3 years ago, that there wasn't, that I didn't have the right product fit for them. They were expecting something that was produced at scale at a cheap price and with a good performance. But I was still in the DIY scene, and I couldn't actually provide them the mycelium material or material that would meet their expectations. And so if you want to scale and go from this DIY and want to scale it, I think it's really important to focus and to remember that you're focusing on these innovators. And clearly my audience there was not within these innovators, more like early majority to late majority. And that's what we, for instance, see. It's typical in the construction. So, but that's one of the important points to focus on if you want to go from DIY to really look what, okay, your marketing, to which target audience are you actually addressing? And then again, in which category are you focusing? And then this is this survey again. And then you see that packaging is, for instance, where companies are really interested in. So 64% of the companies, they said, okay, packaging, that's really the thing. If I want to go bio-based, that's where I'm really interested in. So for instance, packaging could be a really good entry point for if you want to scale from specific packaging to like Woola did, and you want to scale it to actually within a company. Then a third, and that's really my personal lesson as well, is if you want to switch from DIY and you want to scale a company and launch biomaterials, and you want to do it at scale, that it's a really long and bumpy ride. It's pure entrepreneurship, connected with design, of course, and connected with the science part. So it's really challenging. And as an impact entrepreneur, I think that's something that Rodrigo will be able to confirm. But it's a really challenging and a challenging ride to get there. So because you see that if your prototype, where you see on the left hand side where you start with, and there's a lot of cycles actually that you have to go through if you want to arrive at a point that you actually get your product to the market. You need to work on a minimum viable product, and you need to validate it. Then you have to have a product market fit, and then you need to actually go with your business plan and get some fundraising happening in order so you can scale the production actually of your bio-based or your biomaterial or biofabricated material. So you see it's a long ride. And actually when you're starting with DIY, working with like really mycelium in the lab, I didn't realize at that point that it was this challenging to scale actually materials to a specific level that you can say, okay, now there's, for instance, I can get a living out of it. And then 4 and 5, I combined them. And actually, these are like 2 important lessons as well, because it's about being pragmatic if you want to achieve your goal. And that's something that I see that a lot of people are actually having within the DIY scene. And if they want to scale it, how they're having difficulty with. It's because it's like a balancing act, because at the same time you want to go really as close to your DNA as possible and as sustainable as possible, which is perfectly fine. But then you see that you're meeting challenges, technical challenges, to make it really possible. And so there you need to realize that actually it's, I think, being pragmatic as a designer or designer/entrepreneur or scientist/entrepreneur is crucial. And then focus on the aspects that you can do now, and then as well focus on the things that you can do on the long term, but always keeping, of course, this goal of sustainability or of nature inspired materials, always keeping that in mind, but still being pragmatic I think is crucial. And then the 5th was, of course, is short versus long-term goals. So focus on the things that you can do now and focus on the things that you can do later. Now you see, for instance, here a scheme from our project on coffee grounds. And on the right, it's in Dutch, so I didn't make the translation, sorry for that. But you can see on the right-hand side, it's a circular route of how you can valorize coffee grounds to different products. And for instance, you see where we have the little horse, that's actually where we work on new materials. Well, you see there are many options what you can do starting from one waste stream. And the thing is, what is the thing that you can achieve on the short term, and what are the things that you can achieve on the long term? And that I think that's crucial for as well biofabrication and biomaterials, that you realize, okay, what is the low-hanging fruit that I can use to actually scale my project, and then focus on the long term in the later stage. And that's another important, I think, an important learning that I want to share. If you want to scale and if you want to go from DIY and you want to scale your project, it's really differentiate between short and long term. Because what you see as well is that this scale that you're working on, and for instance, the small scale versus a large scale, it's really, of course, has an important impact on the price. And you see as well that the cost and revenue versus the output, it will greatly vary. And that's the thing that we're seeing at this point. So we had there is still this issue of price, and that it's too expensive from the perspective of the people that are used to pay to the bio-based materials. So they have a specific expectation. They're projecting that actually on bio-based materials. And because we're seeing that we're still on the left hand of this curve, we have like quite high costs because the scale is quite small. We see that it's still difficult to compete, that is for biomaterials to compete actually with the traditional materials, which are non-bio-based. I mean, that's one of the reasons that Ecovative actually, they focused on packaging in the beginning. So they wanted to replace styrofoam packaging. And let's say a couple of years ago, the time was not ripe actually to scale it, because people were not actually willing to pay that extra for this bio-based material. So you see now that we're actually moving towards an era where we see that mycelium is being way more, it's becoming relatively more common, still niche, but it's becoming more common. And we see that the scale is growing, and that means that the price as well will drop. That's what I wanted to tell with this graph. Good, that was actually my talk. So my main point was I wanted to share insights on how you can scale from this DIY to actually to a larger scale by setting up companies, for instance, and as well still trying to keep this bio-based and this DIY approach in mind. But we still see there are some challenges along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasper. A very nice switch between the DIY materials from Camilo to then the technical side of Rodrigo, and you're the right match in between to do the innovation management. So really nice. And that brings us to our third speaker, Rodrigo, who's going to tell about his company. So Rodrigo, the stage is yours.
Great, thank you very much. Can you hear me well? And can you see my screen well? Yes, perfect. So I'm Rodrigo. I work in a company called Keynote, and I'm going to tell you a bit the story about what we do and how we do it and why we do what we do. Maybe if we have 20 minutes, I will try to spend just 15 minutes on that and use the last 5 minutes to connect with what Jasper was telling about the scale and how to scale up. Maybe we can, I'm in the office, so we can do a quick tour for you to kind of like see how we do things. There's no one except me, so there's not too much activity, but you can see the machines and the lab and a bit the scale of us. So I'm pretty sure all of you are familiar with these objects. As Jasper was saying, they are packaging objects. They are made of plastic and they work really well. What we think it could be improved is the ratio between the shelf life of the content and the shelf life of the product. Just to explain this, like a plastic bottle, normally an average use of plastic bottles is around 10 minutes. And the plastic, as you can probably guess, is going to be in the environment for hundreds of years. So there's a bit of a mismatch in terms of how to match both shelf lives. So that's why and probably, you know, like things break down in really small fragments in the wall of plastics, and they end up in microorganisms, not only in microorganisms, but in humans through different ways. But this is how microplastics gets into the smallest organisms, plankton, and from plankton goes higher and higher. But you are probably really familiar with images of whales with plastic and penguins, etc. But that's why we created a few years now ago this product. We call it O because it was the name that people were giving it when they were seeing it for the first time. They were making that sound. And basically it's a membrane, a seaweed membrane made of alginate that can encapsulate water or liquids or whatever you want to put on it. Trying to see if it could be a packaging concept to replace single-use doses for liquids in this case. It's a membrane because nature uses membrane, so it's the most efficient way in terms of like ratio of volume and ratio of I suppose a skin that you can make in any kind of scale, from cells to fruits to a bit bigger. So it's quite efficient. Basically, it's made out of seaweed, as I was mentioned. Normally, we use well started with brown seaweed, but like now we are using as well other type of species from red seaweed and from green seaweed as well. And it's a technique that probably you are, if you are in this world of biomaterials, quite familiar with, is Calisthenification. Was invented in the 30s, so by Peschat. One person was working in Unilever at that time to make things like fake cherries and edible caviar and things like that. Had been used quite a lot on the 2000s. Ferran Adrià, Spanish chef, started to use it on gastronomy. But from our understanding, it was not used in the world of packaging. So we thought it could be a good starting point. So what we did at that point, we started to make these prototypes, put it on the hands of people, see what people were saying. And like some of the people were like, this looks like a breast implant, or this looks like a jellyfish, or and trying to iterate from there. And like there was a lot of things around, you cannot close it back, but you could see nature having the same issues of like not having to close back oranges, but having the small segments inside of an orange, and you can peel it for hygiene reasons, etc. So that's why we started to go a bit deeper into this. We licensed this project as Creative Commons from the beginning, which it was kind of like, and we put a recipe online, and a lot of people started to replicate that recipe, and that was quite encouraging. And from there, we started to make a company. Basically, we were designers, not with the thought of becoming entrepreneurs, but like it was clear to us from the beginning that if we wanted to have some impact, we needed to be ourselves who were pushing this venture and this project forward. And until now, we had been trying to do that. We started to understand a bit more around seaweed and around how fast it grows, where it grows, can you cultivate it, answering all these questions. And it's this amazing material that you don't need fertilizer, you don't need fresh water, you don't need farmland, you don't need, it doesn't compete with food crops. So it has a lot of like, it's one of the fastest organisms on earth. So there is a lot of like, I suppose, potential into it. I had been using for really random things, like initially to make packaging even, because you could make glass out of seaweed by burning it into silica. So it's quite interesting material as a whole, and it had been used in different industries like textile industry or food industry, but not in the packaging industry. And try to understand as well what happens if you don't eat our membrane, if nature can process it. And you could see on the right-hand side of our screen, one of our membranes, and you can see in normal composting conditions, it can disappear in around 10 days. An orange peel will take around 2 weeks. Cardboard or other cellulose materials will take around a month. And then PLA, or what is called compostable plastics nowadays, you need industrial composting, which it means heat and pressure to biodegrade. It's the same material as used in 3D printing, for example. And based on that, we decided to fundraise our company through crowdfunding. So we put somehow a video online and try to get people to join us as investors in the company, and in order to industrialize the process. So we had this vision of making a small machinery that can produce things quite locally as well, instead of like a big plant of plastic, and it could be fairly cheap. So we have been developing machines for a while now. Must say that it's quite hard challenge as well to do hardware or to do machines, not to do them in a prototype level, but like to do them in a reliable way. That was the idea for the business to scale up, to provide machines to other businesses. And we have been able to operate these machines quite well ourselves, but until now we have not been able to just send a machine to another business and just press a button and that machine works correctly. So we are in that challenge yet. And thanks to having machines, we have been able to make different products and using them in different scenarios. So we had been doing from quite early on things like running events, where we had been providing, it was a good match in terms of like time of consumption, because when you run, you don't need that much hydration at once. Like you need quite constant, and you throw it. So cups or bottles don't work well. As well, they are a hazard for the runners because they can twist their ankle if they go into one bottle. But like with our solution, kind of like it worked really well. We started with small running events, and then we go bigger and bigger. We did the London Marathon, the biggest event we have done last year, and we did 46,000 units for each of the runners. Not for each of the runners. So like there were 46,000 runners, and we did one for each runner. And we last year we were supposed to do the New York Marathon, which it was quite exciting. But like, as you can imagine, all the marathons had been frozen for the last few months. But we are starting next week doing a marathon in Australia, first marathon of the season, which is exciting for us. And we have been doing things like Roland Garros, like sampling works really well for brands as well, instead of doing things, trying to write as well in the marketing budgets of brands have been quite helpful. We have been interesting things on vending machines, on gyms, selling on supermarkets. We had our own bar, which was quite fun. We did certain collaborations with alcohol companies, maybe not too much for that. Well, there's still kind of like justification. You can, I don't know if you can you hear the sound? Can you thumbs up if you hear the sound? Yeah.
Meaning no need for a glass, ice.
Basically, it was a collaboration with a whiskey company, and we collaborated with
one of the world's best
a bar.
Created 3 new Founders Reserve-based recipes for whiskey lovers to try together. To enjoy them, pop the capsule in your mouth and take a bite to release the delicious cocktail ingredients. The Glenlivet is the first spirits brand in the world to team up with sustainable packaging startup Notpla, who developed the capsule technology. The Glenlivet capsule collection sets new standards on how whiskey can be enjoyed. The Glenlivet.
There was a lot of controversy and in this video because a lot of people, as you can imagine, like comment on the way that you should drink whiskey. And a lot of people start to comment as well where you should put your capsule, if it's in your mouth or through other parts of your body, which was not too pleasant to hear, but like it caused a lot of buzz online. We have been working as well on other applications like sauces. So we have been doing this collaboration with Hellmann's and Just Eat on making seaweed sachets.
Making something disappear looks easy, especially when it's this tasty. Unfortunately, plastic sauce sachets can take up to 700 years to degrade. But what if something biodegradable could be found? Oh, seaweed, there you are. Last year, Just Eat teamed up with Notpla, a sustainable packaging startup, and trialled over 46,000 sachets made from seaweed. They take the seaweed extract, add natural plant ingredients, and blend them into Notpla material that can be filled with delicious sauce. Now we've teamed up with Hellmann's to expand the trial across London before rolling out these sustainable sachets at scale across the UK as part of Just Eat, Notpla, and Hellmann's commitment to reduce plastic pollution.
You see it. Besides OHO, we have been somehow having the ambition of the company to have a portfolio of different products that could somehow help the plastic issue or like helping our mission of making plastic packaging disappear, knowing that this product it works for certain things but doesn't work for many others. So we have been working on together with Just Eat, this delivery platform that I don't know in Europe if it's too common. Like in UK it's quite big, but like in Europe it was now merged with justeat.com. That probably is a bit more with Just Eat. No, what's yours? I don't remember. It's one of the biggest groups of delivery. And they asked us to redesign a bit the Sadco box. The Sadco box is the traditional plastic box that is used for noodles. So we have been applying, and I don't know if you are familiar with cellulose or paper, but like normally in a normal cardboard box, either you have a layer of plastic or either you have PFAs, that is this kind of like called forever chemicals into the pulp to make the pulp grease-proof and waterproof. So we started to apply here seaweed in order to make it kind of like resistant. And we launched our first boxes. They are boxes, they look like normal boxes. So there's nothing special around that. But like the coating, it's just seaweed instead of being plastic, which is quite good. And we have been using it on different applications. And it's quite exciting now. There's a few restaurants in London using them, which is quite nice. And lately we have been working as well quite a lot on films. So basically with this idea of the first product being based on our own machinery had somehow the limitations of scalability on us of producing machines. So it had been taking a while. So we have been trying to produce seaweed material as well that could be used on traditional packaging machinery. So we have been doing things like, this was a collaboration with IKEA for soluble sachets, or this spaghetti, you can put it directly into the pot and it will add some salt. Yeah, things on other formats for other type of liquids. Trying to look at around the challenge as well as PBOH films, that they are the films that they use on detergent tablets that come from petroleum as well. And even if they dissolve, it's a bit unclear if they are nanoplastic or what they are. coffee capsules, and recently as well, we started to look at other type of small applications on a department. We call it special projects that we have been doing, like toothpaste and salad dressings. And we have a new project as well, looking around seaweed paper, because from the seaweed we use on the extraction of the hydrocolloid, not too much of the plant, and the rest of it is mostly cellulose. So we have been trying to make somehow paper out of, instead of trees, out of seaweed, which is much more sustainable and is stronger. And you don't, because as well, there's a lot of pressure now on forestry due to a lot of people changing from plastic to paper. And I suppose there's a limited resort to a certain extent as well. So we have been looking at that. And I think that's kind of it in terms of what I wanted to share it from the screen. And then if we have time, I can give you a little tour on the things. We have time. Can you confirm that? Yeah. Cool. So let me see if I can connect with my phone. Can you hear me from here? Can you hear me from here?
Perfect.
Perfect. Great. So this is where we work. We're a team at the moment of we were a team of 23 people at the beginning of the year, but like these last 3 months have been a bit crazy in terms of like getting bigger the team. I think we hired 30 people in the last 3 months, which has been quite good. And here we have different things, but like we have things like this is a warmery where we test our materials. I don't know if you can see it or through the reflection, that like it's quite small, and we have different machinery to make different type of boxes. But most of the boxes are done not in our facility, but like with paper mills. We're entering on the production area. Hopefully the connection is okay. But here is where we produce the food safe area. We have different units to make different type of products, and then we sometimes pasteurize them with ovens, etc. We work as well on we work as I was mentioning on making machines. So this is the workshop area where we build some of the machines. Some of them, they look like a bit like Frankenstein, and some of the machines are a bit complex. So you can see some of the machines being built, and the complexity of the electronics are quite humongous. But like we have some mills, some CNCs, laser cutters, the moment some conveyors getting there, some casting lines. The lab is off, so I think, let's see if I can find the light. Sorry, it's quite dark, but here is the lights. But yeah, we have different things like environmental chambers where we can test the materials. There is nothing big. Well, there's small membranes being tested now on extreme conditions, and quite a lot of like packaging machinery to test different things. But everything that we do here, we try to do it food safe. So the idea is that like, we start with materials that will be sustainable from the beginning. And we have, what else? A casting line to make rolls of materials, and a small area of prototyping, and photo shooting, and places to make some more material, some collaborations that we have done with brands. This was for pet dogs. And I think that's kind of it to share. Maybe last thing, this is quite fun. We have a bar in the office as well to test our products. Let me turn off the lights. Sorry. Well, up there, it's dark, but like there's a tiki room with a bar where we organize normally tasting sessions and different type of events, let's call it that way. So I think that's us. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how we work and how we do things and which scale. It's not too big, but like it's exciting for us.
Okay, nice. It looks really big there and cool. Thank you. I don't know if there are some questions. If you have a question, just turn on your mic and just ask it. I think maybe Tom Verbist had a question, so turn on your mic and just ask it.
Yeah, hello, good evening. Yeah, I wondered whether this could have an application in for example, medical liquid consumables, because that's also a very big source of plastic waste. And I wondered whether this could be, safe for medical applications. Is it already being looked into, or?
Question is for me?
Yeah.
Perfect, Tom. So yeah, we have been looking at different type of applications. I know in the medical industry, there's a lot of plastic waste by itself. Having said that, I think it's one of the industries that being quite aseptic, for example, is quite important. So it's an extra level for us in terms of complexity to jump to those type of applications. We have done certain things quite early on with doses of nutrition, for example, for kids. So sometimes it's quite hard to dose the milk or things like that. So on that front, we have done a bit, but it's not an area of focus for us at this point, knowing that as I mentioned, it's quite complex from a technical point of view, in terms of making sure that everything is, I suppose, safe as well from a material point of view. So sometimes to make things that disappear in that industry is a bit challenging, but hopefully it will come at some point.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, hi. I have a question. Hi, Rodrigo.
Hi, Luca. How are you?
I'm fine. Last time that I saw you, we met in the ID studio at Art. Hope you remember.
I remember.
Congrats for the developments. It's great to see where you are now. It's amazing. Well, it's just a quick question about the coating, the cardboard coating. If it is heat resistant, and just at which degree it resists, and for how long?
Yeah, so it's heat resistant. So I think we can go up to 170 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
Without kind of like getting melted or burned. It doesn't melt basically, which is good for certain things. It's bad for other things. It's good because you can heat it up your food and nothing happens. It's bad because normally coatings or layers of plastic, they use the property of being heat sealable to create a product. For example, if you think of a coffee cup, if that makes sense, they somehow form it by sealing the material with itself and then sealing it on the back just with heat, without glue. So it made us kind of like quite specific in the way that we first can coat and second can convert products into packaging, basically.
So gluing seems like the only option.
Yes, so gluing is the only option, and as well with gluing, there is kind of like as you can imagine, kind of like quite a lot of development as well to come up with a glue that is not kind of like compromising our values. So there is quite a lot of like complexity there, even if it seems sometimes quite straightforward. But like even on these not details, but like developments is sometimes quite hard to kind of like make sure that that is something scalable and it aligns with the principles that we have.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. See you in London.
Nice to see you. See you in London.
Well, I also had a question, but our mic is not working, so I'm gonna ask it. Her question is, how do you make sure people understand how to properly dispose these PEX solutions? Is communication sufficient to avoid disposal errors, in your opinion?
For me,
Yeah.
so yeah, I suppose the main analogy that we always try to do is with fruits and with food, from different point of view, but like in terms of disposing as well. It's like what you're going to do with a skin of a fruit. You're going to either to eat it because you can eat it depending on the fruit, or you can discard it as a peel of a fruit, basically. So it's basically the main communication we try to do or give. Or sometimes in some cases where the membrane is soluble, we try to kind of like add some value to it. So for example, now we are doing some poly bags, for clothing. Let me see if I have some. This type of bags to put the clothes and you can ship them, if that makes sense. But they have some moisturizer and detergent into it. So when you put it on the washing machine, it will add some value to the clothes. I don't know if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to find as well, like that during the disposability of the object, it's try to add some value to it, or some experience to it. The same way that how you eat it and it's an experience for other products as well. That is not just the end of life and the product experience is gone, but like through the product experience and the end of life, you are as well adding some value to it as well, in order to justify as well some higher cost, or some. It's not just a like-to-like replacement. Is this material can do something else that traditional packaging or plastic cannot do.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if there is another question, maybe also for Camilo or for Jasper.
I think Lieselot has a question I see in the chat.
Yes, hi. Oh, I still have a background, but don't notice that one. I have a question for Jasper. I will probably be doing research on material design as well in the future, but from a researcher's point of view, not a design point of view. And I was wondering, when do you really make the decision to start a sort of small company yourself, or as a researcher go to the industry itself? Because that's a very big difference, right? Starting your own company, or just going to the industry and say, here is the research, maybe you're interested in doing something with it.
I think it depends a lot on your personal motivation or your personal goals. I mean, if you want to if you want to set up a company yourself, and then I think you need to prepare yourself for a couple of years to try and to bring things to the market. And of course it depends of the type of product, but especially if you're working on sustainability and impact entrepreneurship, it might take years. So I think that could be the most important questions. Where do you see yourself in X number of years? I think that would be my first answer to that. And then of course I think it's also well crucial if you want to say, okay, I want to set up the go towards a business and set it up, go for a startup. I think it's really the support that you get. I mean, like the coffee circulair, the project with coffee, we're working with a starter, and we're actually like helping him out, and vice versa. So I think the support, I think the thing that we're doing with him and we're helping him out, I think that support is crucial. And if you have this right support or the right team to actually scale your idea or move from your idea towards a business, I think it's really the support is absolutely crucial, because I'm really now seeing how long it takes. I mean, I think Rodrigo can confirm, from the ID stage and then going towards a minimum viable product and then getting the first paying customers, it takes a while to get this R&D done. So yeah.
Okay, thanks for the explanation.
Yeah,
and
no, my
advice.
pleasure. Or maybe Rodrigo, what is your experience? How long did it take actually?
It took a while. It took a while, and we are not there yet, if that makes sense. So like, yeah, definitely it's a long journey, and I think it's quite easy to come up with an idea and with a first prototype, and then it takes kind of like a lot of energy and resources to kind of like pass that towards kind of like the next scale of times 100 or next scale of times 1,000,000 or next scale times 1 billion is quite a lot of work that, to be honest as well, depending on what's kind of like your background or your interest, sometimes maybe it's not the best use of your time either. So like it's always a balance of, you know, I see myself kind of like, sometimes I come home as like what I have done like HR and admin, and it's like what I'm doing with my life. So like you need to kind of like find as well a bit your personal balance on what you are happy and good at, and try to see what is the best thing for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely spot on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have one last question in the chat from Christian. He's saying, hi, I'm an industrial designer from University of Chile. I would like to ask to all of you, so I assume it's the three of you, in order to give 3D printers a new use and eliminate plastics in some future, how do you see the insertion of bio-based materials in this area? So I don't know who wants to answer it.
No, I think it's completely possible. I think it's just a matter of of experimenting. You know, there are a lot of materials. For example, we did some experimentation with the mussel shells, because when you grind them and you heat them, they throw the chitin that they have, and that helps very well in the nozzle of the 3D printer to go as PLA or as ABS direct into the shape. So it's not something difficult. I think it's just a matter of experimenting and being able to hack and to damage some machines. I think that is what is really important. Just understanding that you can just mount and unmount things and prototype, because this is something that we are very good at as designers. We just prove something and then just unmount it, and if it doesn't work, and try to do something else. So it is feasible, but as I said, it's just a matter of or trying to convince the people that are more into, oh, don't touch the machine, it's a super important thing, keep it safe, just to let you play around. I mean, in the university, we did it in the beginning. We went into a very big problem because we damaged some machines, and you know, you need to find the money to replace it. But when you are damaging the fifth one, they are okay. Okay, it's good, because then you then you find something interesting and then you go for it. So it's okay. I think it's part of the process.
I think from my side, I think the biomaterials. So I mean, like where you have an organic waste stream that you combine. I think that's the most plausible way to combine it with the 3D printing. I'll explain you why. Because my co-founder of Glimps, Elise, she has been doing her PhD for the past 4 years on biofabrication and 3D printing, and then they call it 4D printing because it's actually growing afterwards. So it's like an extra dimension. But I think she's giving her defense on Tuesday. So people interested, for sure we can share the link to her presentation, to her talk. But I think she said it's very challenging to actually combine the biology part together with the technical 3D part, because there are some limitations as well in there. So the mycelium printing with a 3D printer, it's possible, but still the prototypes, they still look that's not optimal. So there's still quite some work that needs to be done if you want to use mycelium. So that's why I think once you have like in our case, we have been combining coffee grounds and PLA, which I'm not the biggest fan of it. But if you have like a more bio carrier or bio-based carrier, let's say, or don't know the exact term, how to call it, but the bio-based material where you started from, then actually you can easily switch from a non-bio to a bio-based printing, I believe. So, but the biofabrication, I think that's another aspect, and that will take way longer to get it actually in a proper shape, let's say.
And I don't know if there isn't much more to add to that. I will say if it's to replace packaging, I will say that, like, I don't know if there is the 3D printing technology, and not the material, but like technology, it's kind of like at the moment proved to kind of like do quite a lot of things on the packaging world, because comparison with injection molding, for example, or other type of techniques is not that commonly used, let's put it that way. So even if you can do things like Atelier Luma did this thing as well with algae and a mix of PLA for filament for 3D printing, and super nice, cool bases and packagings, but they are kind of like quite nice objects as one-off, but like it's quite hard to justify their use as a single-use packaging, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much also for the very different answers on these questions. I think it's yeah, over for today, let's say it like that. I'm just quickly gonna share my screen again. 2 seconds. Just to close off the event, saying that we are onto some more stuff, so more keynotes, for example, and some other ideas. So of course you can always contact us, or you can follow our Instagram or go to our website to go there and to contact us if you have some questions. And of course, if you have some more questions for the speakers, also get in touch with us, then we can communicate it. And we will send the presentation of today, or we will send around the recordings of this presentation to everyone subscribed to the event. So that was it. Thank you for all being here in such a great amount. So that's very nice.